The CCTV showed something was wrong before the news. Did I notice it on a Tuesday? Not because I was looking for it, but because watching screens was my job. 12 monitors, 3 shifts, 7 days a week. I was the night security supervisor at Meridian Plaza, a mid-rise commercial complex in the eastern sprawl of Kansas City. The building housed insurance firms, a dental practice, 2 floors of co-working space, and a ground-level pharmacy that attracted its share of late-night foot traffic. My name is Daniel Oren. I was 41 years old, recently divorced, and the only person awake in a building designed for 1,500 people. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. when I first saw the woman on camera 9. She was standing at the edge of the pharmacy parking lot, just beyond the sodium glow of the overhead lamp, not moving, not waiting for a ride, not smoking, just standing with her arms hanging at her sides and her head tilted at an angle that made my neck ache in sympathy. I zoomed in. Her blouse was untucked, one shoe missing. Her mouth was open, not wide, not screaming, just slack, like she'd forgotten how to close it. I almost called it in, almost radioed Marcus, the roving patrol guard who covered the exterior perimeter between midnight and 4. But something stopped me. She wasn't doing anything. Loitering wasn't a crime. Odd behavior at 3 a.m. near a pharmacy wasn't exactly unprecedented. I logged it in the incident report. Female individual, stationary, lot C, no apparent distress. And moved on to the next camera cycle. 15 minutes later, she was gone. I scanned the surrounding feeds. Nothing. She hadn't walked toward the street, hadn't entered the building, hadn't crossed into another camera's field. She simply wasn't there anymore. Marcus came in at the end of his loop, smelling like cigarettes and cold air. He poured himself coffee from the thermos he brought every night. His wife made it, he said, though I knew they were separated too. He asked if it was quiet. I said mostly. Told him about the woman. He shrugged. Tweakers, he said. They wander. But I pulled up the recording and showed him the footage. He leaned in, watched the stillness of her, watched the way her head was angled. That's weird, he admitted. Then he straightened. But not our problem. It should have ended there. It almost did. But 3 hours later, when first light crept across the parking structure and the early cleaning crew arrived, I checked camera 9 again out of habit. There was a stain on the asphalt where she'd stood. Dark, irregular, roughly the size of a dinner plate. Could have been oil. Could have been anything. I clocked out at 6, drove home to my apartment on Troost Avenue, microwaved leftover pasta, and slept until noon. When I woke, I checked my phone and found 2 messages. One from my ex-wife asking about a tax document. One from Marcus, sent at 4:15 a.m. Just a single line. Dude, check the news. I opened my browser. The local NBC affiliate had a short piece buried beneath weather and sports. Disturbance at Research Medical Center. That was 10 minutes from the plaza. The article was thin. Multiple patients presenting with extreme agitation. Temporary lockdown of emergency department. Police presence requested. No details. No quotes from staff. A single stock photo of the hospital exterior. I texted Marcus back. What about it? His reply came 20 minutes later. My cousin works intake there. She said they're not agitated. She said they're biting. I remember reading that word and feeling nothing. Not fear, not recognition, just confusion. Biting. Like animals. Like something from a movie too absurd to take seriously in daylight, with the sound of traffic outside and the taste of reheated marinara still on my tongue. I put my phone down, went back to sleep. That was the last ordinary rest I would ever have. When I returned to the plaza that evening for my shift, the parking lot was fuller than usual, not with cars, with people. 3 police cruisers sat near the pharmacy entrance, lights spinning but sirens off. An ambulance idled by the west exit. Something had changed while I slept. The lobby was locked from the inside, which was protocol only during confirmed threat events. I had to badge in through the service entrance on the north side, walking past 2 officers who didn't acknowledge me. Their posture told me everything. Hands on belts, eyes scanning the lot, weight forward on their toes. These weren't men responding to a shoplifting call. Inside the security office, Marcus was already seated despite his shift not starting for another hour. Beside him was Priya Chandrasekaran, the building's operations manager, a woman I'd spoken to maybe 15 times in 2 years. She was in jeans and a wrinkled blouse, no makeup, hair pulled back hastily. She'd been called in. "Daniel," she said, not looking up from the monitor bank. "Sit down." On camera 4, the pharmacy's interior feed, I could see 3 people on the floor, not dead, moving, twitching. One of them was being restrained by 2 paramedics, while a third prepared an injection. The patient's jaw was working, opening and closing with mechanical repetition, like a broken hinge. "What happened?" I asked. "Pharmacy got hit around 7 p.m., Marcus said. Woman walked in acting erratic, bit the pharmacist, bit a customer, then she just dropped, collapsed on the floor and started seizing. The pharmacist. He started the same thing about 20 minutes later. Aggression, then seizure." Priya turned to face me. Her expression was controlled, but her hands weren't. They gripped the edge of the desk hard enough to whiten her knuckles. "Kansas City PD has requested we maintain lockdown of the building until they clear the scene. I need you and Marcus to monitor all exterior cameras and report any—" She paused, choosing her words. "Unusual pedestrian behavior." "Unusual how?" I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned back to the monitors and pointed at camera 12, which covered the loading dock. A man was leaning against the concrete barrier, his body convulsing. Even through the grainy feed, I could see the foam at his mouth, the unnatural rigidity of his spine. I called 911. The line was busy for 4 minutes. Marcus and I settled into a rhythm. He watched cameras 1 through 6. I took 7 through 12. Priya sat behind us making calls. To building tenants, to her corporate office, to people I couldn't identify. Her voice was calm and professional, and I realized later she was already planning evacuation routes she hadn't told us about. By 9 p.m., the police had moved the pharmacy patients into the ambulance and departed. The lot was empty. The cleaning crew had been turned away. The building was sealed with only us 3 inside, plus a handful of late-working tenants on the 4th floor who hadn't responded to Priya's emails. I watched the cameras. The streets beyond our lot were quieter than they should have been for a Tuesday evening. A few cars passed, moving fast. No pedestrians, no joggers, no dog walkers. The city was holding its breath, and I could feel it through 12 screens of silent footage. At 10:23 p.m., camera 9 caught movement. 2 figures at the far edge of Lot C, right where the woman had stood the night before. They weren't walking. They were staggering. Their gait broken and asymmetric, like marionettes operated by someone unfamiliar with human locomotion. One of them collided with a parked car and didn't react. Didn't flinch, didn't redirect. just pressed against the vehicle's hood until their legs drove them sideways, and they stumbled onward. "Marcus," I said. He rolled his chair over, watched, said nothing for a long time. "Those aren't drunk people," he finally said. "No." Priya appeared behind us. She watched the screen with an expression I'd learned to recognize over the coming days. The face of someone recalculating every assumption they'd built their safety on. "Lock the loading dock," she said quietly. "Lock everything, now." I did. Every exterior door, every fire exit, every service entrance. 14 access points secured with magnetic locks and steel bolts. I did it in 6 minutes. It wasn't fast enough to matter, but it made us feel like we had control over something. The 2 figures in Lot C disappeared into the darkness beyond camera range. They never came back. Others would. By midnight, the 4th-floor tenants had finally come downstairs. There were 4 of them. A startup team that had been grinding through a product launch. Jake Novak was the founder. 28, wiry, with the kind of manic energy that made him either the first to act or the first to crack. His colleagues were Becca Stein, a developer with a voice so quiet you had to lean in. Omar Hassani, their marketing lead, who kept checking his phone like it owed him answers. And Trish Yamamoto, operations, the only one among them who looked genuinely frightened rather than confused. Jake bounded into the security office like he owned the building. "What's the lockdown about? We have a deadline." Priya explained calmly. "Disturbance in the pharmacy, police advisory, precautionary measure." She made it sound bureaucratic, almost boring. Jake relaxed. Becca looked at the monitors and saw nothing alarming, just empty lots and quiet hallways. But Trish lingered at the doorway. She was looking at Camera 9's recording, which I'd left paused on a frame showing the 2 staggering figures. "What is that?" she asked. "We're monitoring it," I said. Which was true. It was also completely inadequate. Marcus made another coffee run. I stayed on the screens. The city had gone dark, not literally. The streetlights still burned and traffic signals still cycled. But the human activity had drained away, like someone had pulled a plug. I flipped between cameras, looking for life, and found only absence. Then Camera 3 showed me something. The main entrance to Meridian Plaza had a glass-fronted lobby, and through it I could see the street beyond. A city bus had stopped at the intersection, as buses do, except it was 2 a.m. and no route ran through here at that hour. It sat at the red light, with its interior lights on and its doors open. Through the glass, I could count 6 passengers, all still in their seats, none of them moving. The light turned green. The bus didn't move. The doors stayed open. The passengers remained frozen. I watched for 7 minutes. Nothing changed. Then, on minute 8, one of the passengers stood. The motion was wrong. Too fast in some parts, too slow in others, like a video buffering. They moved to the open door and stepped down. Missed the curb, hit the pavement face first, got up without hesitation, and began walking toward our building. "Priya," I said, "come look at this." She saw it. The figure was crossing the street now, heading directly for our main entrance. Its face was invisible in the night, but the way it moved was unmistakable. That same broken puppet gait, the absence of self-correction, the mechanical persistence. "Is the lobby glass reinforced?" she asked. "Tempered," I said. "Not reinforced." She turned to Marcus, who had returned with his coffee and was already watching the screen. "Is there anything in this building we can use to barricade the front entrance?" "The lobby furniture is bolted down," he said. "But there's filing cabinets on the 2nd floor, heavy ones. Get them." Marcus hesitated, looking at me. I nodded. He left. The figure reached the lobby glass. It didn't try the door, didn't pound on it, didn't seem to recognize it as a barrier. It simply walked into the glass panel at full stride, bounced off, staggered, and walked into it again and again. The sound was faint through the walls but audible, a rhythmic thud like a metronome made of flesh and bone. Jake appeared behind us. "What the hell is that?" "Stay back from the lobby," Priya said. "Is that a person hitting our door?" "Stay back." Omar was filming on his phone. I saw his hand shaking. Trish was pulling Becca toward the stairwell, already understanding what the rest of us were still processing. This wasn't a disturbance. This wasn't a drunk. This wasn't something that would be resolved by morning. The glass held. For now. The figure kept walking into it with the patience of something that had forgotten what pain was. 43 impacts before it finally cracked the outer pane. I counted every one. At 3:15 a.m., we lost the internet. Not gradually, not a buffering, not a slowdown. Complete disconnection, as if someone had pulled the cable from the wall. Omar's phone switched to cellular, which still functioned, and he was the one who found the emergency broadcast. He held his screen up in the security office, his face underlit and pale, and we all gathered around those 5 inches of light like primitive people around a fire. The broadcast was text-based, cycling on the FEMA alert system. "Shelter in place, Kansas City metropolitan area. Avoid contact with individuals displaying erratic behavior. Do not approach. Do not attempt physical restraint. Await further instruction." That was it. No explanation, no timeline, no indication of what was happening or how large it had become. "Erratic behavior," Jake said. "That's what they're calling it?" Priya took charge in the way that only certain people can. Not by demanding authority, but by being the only one, with a plan. She gathered us in the second-floor conference room, away from the lobby where the figures still rhythmically struck the cracking glass. 7 of us around a mahogany table designed for quarterly reviews and PowerPoint presentations. "Here's what we know," she said. "Something is happening in the city that's causing people to become violent and non-responsive to normal stimuli. The police and emergency services are overwhelmed or redirected. We are locked in a building with structural security but limited supplies." "What supplies do we have?" Trish asked. "The first practical question," I answered. "The break room on each floor has a small kitchen. Combined, we're looking at maybe 40 bottles of water, assorted snacks from vending machines, a refrigerator with some leftovers. There's a first aid kit in my office and one on the 4th floor." "The pharmacy," Omar said. We all looked at him. "The pharmacy downstairs. It's closed, but it's got stock. Water, bandages, over-the-counter stuff." "It's also adjacent to the lobby entrance," Marcus said, "where our friend is currently trying to headbutt through the glass." "Can we access it from inside?" Jake asked. I shook my head. "It has its own entrance. Separate lease, separate security system. We'd have to go outside and come back in, or breach the interior wall." Priya tabled the pharmacy discussion. "Priority 1 is monitoring all entry points. Daniel, Marcus, I need rotating coverage on the cameras. Priority 2 is communication. Omar, you have cell service. Try reaching emergency services, family, anyone who can tell us what's happening. Priority 3 is inventory. Becca, Trish, catalog everything edible and drinkable in this building." People moved. Having tasks helped. I could see it in the way their shoulders dropped slightly, the way their breathing steadied. Purpose is a narcotic when fear is the alternative. I returned to the monitors. Marcus took the first rest, 30 minutes on the break room couch, while I watched all 12 feeds. The figure at the lobby had company now. 2 more had joined, performing the same mindless collision with the glass. The outer pane had spider-webbed completely. The inner pane was still intact, but I didn't know its rating, and the architectural specs were on a server I could no longer access. Camera 7 showed me the service alley on the south side. Empty. Camera 10 covered the parking structure entrance, also empty. But I noticed something that chilled me more than the figures at the door. A car was half inside the structure, stopped precisely at the entrance barrier. Engine apparently still running based on the exhaust I could see wisping from the tailpipe. The driver's door was open. No driver visible. Someone had tried to leave and hadn't made it. Priya came down at 4 a.m. with coffee, instant from the third-floor kitchen. She handed me a mug without speaking and stood behind me, watching the screens. We shared a silence that was more communicative than any conversation. We both understood. This wasn't going to end by morning. The city wasn't coming to save us. The only question was how long the glass would hold. I counted 7 of them now, I said. At the front. I know, she said. I've been watching from upstairs. Dawn arrived without comfort. The light revealed what darkness had mercifully hidden. The figures at the lobby door were worse than I'd imagined. Their skin had a grayish pallor, their clothing torn and stained with fluids I chose not to identify. One of them was missing most of her lower jaw, the remaining tissue hanging in a flap that swung with each impact against the glass. She didn't bleed. Whatever injury had taken her jaw had happened long enough ago for the blood to stop. Or whatever passed for circulation in her body had simply ceased to function normally. The inner glass pane cracked at 6:42 a.m. Not catastrophically, a single line running diagonally from the upper right corner. But it was enough to change the math. I woke Marcus, called Priya down, gathered everyone in the stairwell between the first and second floors, which had fire doors on both ends and no exterior access. The lobby won't hold past today, I said. We need to barricade the interior corridor leading from the lobby to the rest of the building. Jake volunteered immediately. What do we use? Filing cabinets from the second floor, Marcus said. Desks. Anything heavy enough to create a choke point. We worked for 2 hours. Jake and Omar hauled 4-drawer steel filing cabinets down the stairs, while Marcus and I positioned them in the corridor, creating a layered barrier. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't even particularly effective against a determined human. But these things didn't seem determined. They seemed compulsive. They moved forward until something stopped them, then kept pressing forward without strategy or adaptation. During the work, Becca approached me quietly. She'd been on inventory duty with Trish, and she handed me a handwritten list. Bottled water, 37 units. Vending machine snacks, approximately 60 items. Refrigerator contents, mixed, some already expired. Break room pantries, instant coffee, sugar packets, a box of granola bars, 2 cans of soup. For 7 people, I said. 3 days, she said. Maybe 4 if we ration. And after 4 days? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Omar found us at noon, practically vibrating. His phone had been cycling through contacts and emergency numbers all morning. Most calls dropped, texts went undelivered. But he'd gotten through to his sister in Lawrence, 40 miles west. She says it's there too, he said. Lawrence. She's watching it from her apartment window. People in the streets, same as what we're seeing. The National Guard rolled through at dawn, but she hasn't seen them since. Did she say what it is? Priya asked. Nobody's saying what it is, though the news keeps calling it a public health emergency. The governor declared a state of emergency last night. She said there are roadblocks on I-70. So it's not just Kansas City, Trish said. Her voice was flat. It's not just Kansas City, Omar confirmed. We ate lunch in silence. Granola bars and bottled water, rationed carefully. The absurdity of it. 7 adults sharing snack food in a commercial building, while something fundamental about the world outside collapsed, wasn't lost on me. But absurdity is the first luxury you abandon in survival. At 2 p.m., the lobby glass gave way entirely. I watched it on camera 4. The pane collapsed inward in a cascade of safety glass chunks, and the figures poured through with no acknowledgement of the barrier's absence. They simply continued forward at the same pace they'd been moving, now unobstructed, flooding into the lobby like water through a broken dam. They reached our filing cabinet barricade within 90 seconds. The first one hit it and stopped, then pressed. Then others accumulated behind it, adding weight, adding force. The cabinets shifted half an inch. Everyone upstairs, I said into the radio Priya had distributed. 2nd floor minimum, now. We abandoned the 1st floor entirely, pulled the fire door shut on the stairwell. It was steel, rated for 90 minutes against fire. I had no idea how long it would hold against a dozen bodies pressing endlessly, stupidly, relentlessly forward. But it bought us time. Everything from that point on was measured in the currency of time bought. The 2nd floor became our world. 2,000 square feet of co-working space, open plan with glass-walled meeting rooms, a kitchen alcove, bathrooms, and a narrow balcony overlooking Lot C that no one had ever used for anything except smoking during company parties. The balcony had a wrought iron railing and a drop of roughly 20 feet to the concrete below. Not survivable as a jump without injury, but notable as the only exterior access point that wasn't on the ground floor. Priya established order quickly. She designated sleeping areas, the 2 larger meeting rooms, 1 for each group, and a common area for meals and planning. She created a watch rotation for the stairwell door. 2-hour shifts, always 2 people. Listen for sounds. Watch for the door moving. Report anything. The first shift was Marcus and me. We sat on the landing between floors, our backs against the wall, listening to silence. Below us, behind the fire door, we could hear them. Not screaming, not growling, nothing so dramatic, just movement, the shuffling of feet, the dull compression of bodies against steel. A sound like the building itself breathing through congested lungs. You think this is everywhere? Marcus asked. Omar's sister said Lawrence. Lawrence is nothing. I mean everywhere. Like the whole country. I don't know. My kids are in Topeka with their mom. I didn't have anything useful to say to that. Marcus's children were 8 and 11. His ex-wife lived in a residential neighborhood near Washburn University. I'd seen photos, a small house with a chain-link fence and a trampoline in the backyard. It wasn't a fortress. It wasn't even close. Cell service still up? I asked. Dropped about an hour ago. Omar's the only one who had bars. Now he's got nothing. We sat with that. No communication, no information. No way to know if the people we cared about were alive or dead or something worse than either. Priya spelled us at midnight. She and Trish took the next shift while Marcus and I tried to sleep in the northern meeting room. The floor was carpeted but thin, and the building's HVAC still functioned. A strange mercy that the power grid hadn't failed yet. The hum of climate control was the only normal sound in a world that had shed normalcy like dead skin. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark and listened to Jake tossing in the corner, to Becca's measured breathing near the window, to Omar muttering in his sleep. I thought about the woman on camera 9, the first one, Tuesday night. The slack jaw, the tilted head. Had she already turned? Had she been in the process of turning? Had she stood there in the parking lot experiencing the last moments of human consciousness before whatever this was consumed her? I thought about the pharmacist who'd been bitten. The 20-minute gap between bite and behavioral change. 20 minutes. That was faster than any disease model I'd ever heard of. Prions took months. Rabies took weeks. Even the most aggressive viral infections needed days. 20 minutes suggested something else. Something I didn't have the expertise to name. By morning of the second day, we had our first internal conflict. Jake wanted to go down to the pharmacy. He'd been thinking about it all night, he said. And he'd figured out a path. The pharmacy shared an interior wall with the first-floor electrical room. If he could get into the electrical room from the maintenance shaft, accessible on our floor, he could breach the drywall and enter the pharmacy from behind. Medications, he said. Antibiotics, painkillers, bandages. We're going to need them. You don't know what's on the other side of that wall, Marcus said. The electrical room is locked from our side. It has no exterior access. And if there's one of those things in the pharmacy? Then I fall back. Priya looked at me. I was the security supervisor. This was my building. My decision sat heavy in the room, like a physical thing. I said yes. Not because I was certain it was safe. Nothing was certain anymore. But because Jake was right about one thing. We would need medical supplies eventually. And eventually was approaching faster than any of us wanted to admit. Becca had cut her hand on a broken mug that morning. It wasn't deep, but we'd used our last adhesive bandage on it. The first aid kits were already half depleted from Jake's enthusiasm with the filing cabinets, which had left him with scraped knuckles he'd bandaged without complaint. The maintenance shaft was accessed through a ceiling panel in the second-floor utility closet. I'd only been up there twice in my 3 years. Once during my building orientation, and once to reset a tripped breaker during a storm. The shaft ran horizontally along the building's spine, connecting each floor's electrical systems. It was narrow, 2 feet wide, maybe 3 feet tall, and lined with cable runs and junction boxes. Jake went first. He was the slimmest among us and the most eager, which I'd learned was either an asset or a liability depending on whether his enthusiasm outpaced his judgment. I went second, carrying the emergency flashlight from my office. Marcus stayed at the shaft entrance with a radio, ready to relay to Priya upstairs. The crawl was uncomfortable but not dangerous. Dust, darkness, the smell of old insulation. Jake moved quickly ahead of me, his phone flashlight bouncing off metal surfaces. We reached the vertical junction, a narrow ladder built into the wall that descended to the first-floor electrical room. Jake went down silently. I followed. The electrical room was dark and empty. The breaker panels lined one wall, LED indicators still glowing green. The air smelled like ozone and machine heat. The door to the corridor, our side, was locked with a deadbolt I carried the key for. On the far wall, which we faced now with renewed attention, was the shared barrier between us and the pharmacy. Drywall. Just drywall over steel studs. On the pharmacy side, the wall was probably backed with shelving, but we wouldn't know until we opened it. Jake produced a utility knife he'd found in the co-working space supply cabinet. He scored the drywall carefully, cutting a rectangle roughly 2 feet by 3 feet. large enough to crawl through. The sound was minimal. The knife slid through the chalky material with a soft whisper. He peeled back the section and revealed insulation. Pink fiberglass bats between the studs. Behind that, another layer of drywall, the pharmacy side. He cut through the insulation, pulled it free, and pressed his ear against the second layer. Listened. I held my breath. "Nothing," he whispered. He cut the second panel. The rectangle fell inward, landing on linoleum with a sound that made my stomach drop. We froze. 10 seconds. 20. No response from the other side. Jake shined his phone through the opening. The beam illuminated a back storage area. Metal shelving units stacked with boxes, a small desk with a computer terminal, a refrigerated cabinet with a glass front. No movement, no figures. The pharmacy storage room was empty. He climbed through. I handed him the flashlight and waited at the opening, watching his silhouette move between the shelves. He was efficient, I'll give him that. He filled a canvas tote he'd brought with pill bottles, bandage rolls, antiseptic, and a box of surgical masks. He found bottled water too, a case of 24 that had been stored for the pharmacy staff. "Jake," I whispered. "That's enough. Come back." But he was moving toward the front of the storage room, toward the door that led to the main pharmacy floor, the retail area with its counter and aisles, the area that opened directly into the lobby, the area that now connected to the compromised main entrance. "Jake," I said again, louder. He stopped at the door, pressed his ear against it, and I saw his body stiffen. His head snapped back. He looked at me across the dark room with an expression I can still see when I close my eyes. "They're right on the other side," he mouthed. He came back through the opening fast, too fast. His shoulder caught the edge of the cut drywall, and a chunk broke free, tumbling onto the pharmacy side with a clatter and that echoed in the silence. We both froze, crouched in the electrical room, staring at the dark rectangle of the breach. Sound came through. Not immediately. 3 seconds of silence first, which was almost worse because it suggested something processing, something reacting. Then, shuffling. That distinctive, uncoordinated movement, growing louder, getting closer to the storage room. "Seal it," Jake gasped. "With what?" We had a utility knife, a flashlight, and a bag of medical supplies. No tools, no boards, no adhesive strong enough to matter. "Go," I said. "Up the shaft, now." Jake grabbed the tote bag and lunged for the ladder. I stayed long enough to drag a breaker panel's maintenance cart, a heavy wheeled unit, in front of the hole. It wasn't a seal. It was barely an obstacle. But it blocked the line of sight, and that was something. I was 3 rungs up the ladder when I heard the storage room door open. The sound was distinct. A lever handle depressing, followed by the creak of hinges. They could operate doors. That was new information, terrifying information. I climbed faster, the metal rungs vibrating under my hands, and pulled myself into the horizontal shaft where Jake was already crawling toward the second-floor exit. We emerged into the utility closet gasping and covered in dust. Marcus was waiting, radio in hand, eyes wide. "Report," he said. "Got supplies," Jake said, lifting the tote. "Also possibly compromise the electrical room access point. We need to secure that door permanently." Marcus looked at me for confirmation. I nodded. "They're in the pharmacy storage room now. Maybe in the electrical room by the time we figure out our next move. That door is a standard commercial lock. It won't hold if they learn to push against it." We welded it shut. Not literally, but close enough. Omar had found a portable power drill in the maintenance closet, and we drove 6-inch screws through the door and into the frame from our side. Then we pushed a full filing cabinet against it and piled the heaviest objects we could find. A printer, stacks of law books from the insurance firm's library, 2 monitors still attached to their stands. It held. Through the door we could hear them. Not many, maybe 2 or 3, judging by the sound. They pressed against the door with that same mindless persistence, but the screws held, the cabinet held, and after an hour they seemed to lose focus. The pressing stopped. The sounds faded. "They don't have memory," Trish observed when we reported back. She'd been thinking while we were in the shaft. I could tell by the legal pad she'd been writing on, covered in notes and diagrams. They respond to stimulus. Sound drew them. When the sound stopped and the barrier didn't yield, they lost interest. "That's useful," Priya said. "It's critical," Trish corrected. "It means we can direct them, draw them away from areas we need to access or toward areas we want them contained." It was the first tactical advantage we'd identified. Everything prior had been reactive. Barricade, retreat, hide. Trish's observation shifted something in the room. People sat up straighter. Becca uncapped a marker and started drawing a floor plan on the whiteboard. "If sound draws them," she said, her quiet voice carrying unexpected authority, "then we can use that. Clear a path by creating a distraction elsewhere." "For what?" Omar asked. "For leaving," she said. The word hung in the air. Leaving. No one had said it yet. The building had been our shelter, our fortress, our denial given architectural form. But Becca was right. We had 3 days of food, maybe 4, a compromised ground floor, an unknown number of infected in the lobby, and no communication with the outside world. We couldn't stay forever. The building was a lifeboat with a leak. The only question was when we'd have to swim. The power went out at 9:47 p.m. on the second night. Not a gradual dimming, a complete cessation, as if the city itself had exhaled its last breath. The HVAC fell silent. The emergency lights kicked on, bathing the floor in amber that made everyone look ill. The security monitors went dark. My eyes, my connection to the outside, gone in an instant. "Generator?" Jake asked. "Building has one," I said. "Basement level, diesel. But the basement is accessed from the ground floor, which is compromised," Marcus finished. "So we're dark," Omar said. "We're dark." The amber emergency lights would last 8 hours on battery backup. After that, we'd have whatever flashlights and phone batteries remained. The implications cascaded. No cameras meant no awareness of external threats. No HVAC meant the building would become an oven by midday as August heat accumulated in the sealed structure. No powered locks meant the magnetic seals on the stairwell doors would release. That last realization hit me like cold water. "The mag locks," I said. "They're fail-safe. Power loss defaults to unlocked." Priya understood instantly. The fire doors between floors. All of them. Every stairwell door in the building just opened. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Below us, somewhere in the dark, the infected on the ground floor now had unobstructed access to every stairwell in the building. Our barricade on the main stairwell was still intact, filing cabinets and the screwed-shut maintenance door. But the building had 3 other stairwells, east, west, and service. "Who barricaded the other stairwells?" Trish asked. Nobody answered, because nobody had. We'd focused on the main threat, the lobby breach, the maintenance shaft. and forgotten that the building had redundant vertical access. Fire code required it. Multiple independent evacuation routes. The same design that would save lives in a fire was now a network of open doors leading infected directly to us. Marcus and I moved immediately. Flashlights in hand, we sprinted to the east stairwell. The door stood open, maglock disengaged, held ajar by its own weight. The stairwell beyond was dark. We listened. Silence. I pulled the door shut, and Marcus drove screws through the frame while I braced it. 4 screws. Not enough for certainty, but enough for now. The west stairwell was the same, open, dark, silent. We secured it identically. The service stairwell was at the far end of the building, past the bathrooms and the utility rooms. As we approached, Marcus grabbed my arm. Sound from below. That shuffling, that compression of bodies in a space too small for coordination. They were already in the service stairwell, already climbing. We ran. Marcus drove screws into the door with a speed born of absolute terror, the drills screaming, metal biting into wood frame. 5 screws, 6, 7. I pushed a desk against it, then a chair, then my own body weight as I felt the first impact from the other side. They'd found us, not through intelligence, through the simple mathematics of random movement in a building with newly opened pathways. They'd wandered into the stairwell, moved upward because upward was a direction, and reached our floor because 2 flights of stairs is not a meaningful obstacle to something that doesn't tire. The door shuddered. Marcus was still drilling. 8 screws. 9. I could hear them behind the door. Not 1, not 2, but many. A crowd. A compression of bodies in a concrete shaft, all pressing forward with equal mindless force. "It's holding," Marcus said. But his voice wasn't confident. It was a prayer. I called Priya on the radio. "Service stairwell compromised. Door secured but under pressure. Recommend everyone move to the north side of the floor. If this fails, we go up." "Up where?" she asked. "3rd floor, 4th, roof." "The roof has no shelter." "The roof has distance." A pause, then, "Copy. Moving everyone north." The door held through the night, but I didn't sleep. I sat against the desk, feeling every impact through the wood and metal, counting each one like heartbeats of something that shouldn't be alive. By the 3rd day, the heat was oppressive. August in Kansas City without air conditioning turns any building into a kiln. And Meridian Plaza was no exception. The sealed windows, a feature that had seemed modern and efficient a week ago, now trapped thermal energy with nowhere to go. The temperature on the 2nd floor reached 94 degrees by noon. Everyone was sweating through their clothes. The water supply, already limited, was being consumed faster than we'd projected. Tempers frayed accordingly. Jake wanted to open the balcony door for ventilation. Marcus argued it was a breach point. The wrought iron railing was decorative, not security grade, and the sound of an opening door might attract attention from below. The argument escalated until Priya stepped between them with a compromise. The balcony door would be opened only at night, when temperatures dropped, and only while someone stood watch. It was a reasonable solution. But the underlying tension wasn't about the door. It was about the calculus we were all running independently. The grim arithmetic of 7 people, diminishing supplies, and no rescue on the horizon. Omar was the first to say it plainly. "Nobody is coming for us." We were eating dinner. Half a granola bar each, a handful of almonds Trish had found in her desk drawer, and warm water that tasted like plastic from the bottles. The emergency lights had died that morning. We lived by flashlight now, rationing batteries with the same careful anxiety we applied to food. You don't know that, Becca said. My phone died yesterday. Before it did, the last alert was 12 hours old. Same FEMA text, no update, no National Guard coordination, no rescue protocols. If someone was coming, they'd have been here. Maybe they're dealing with higher priority areas, Trish offered. We are a mid-rise commercial building in a major metropolitan area. If we're not a priority, then priorities have ceased to exist. Priya didn't argue with him. She sat in the darkness with her hands folded and let the statements settle over the group like ash. Then she spoke. Omar's right that we can't count on external rescue in a meaningful time frame. That means we need to plan for self-extraction. Self-extraction. The word had a clinical precision that made the impossible sound manageable. We weren't fleeing in terror. We weren't abandoning safety. We were extracting ourselves. The balcony, I said. 20-foot drop to Lot C. If we had rope. The server room on the 4th floor has cable runs, Jake said. Ethernet cable, bundled, enough to reach. Can Ethernet cable hold a person's weight? Braided? Maybe. We could test it. And once we're on the ground? Marcus asked. We're in an open parking lot surrounded by those things. Trish's theory, I said. Sound is distraction. We create noise on the north side of the building, draw them away from Lot C, then descend from the balcony on the south side. And go where? Marcus pressed. Anywhere with resources. The fire station on Prospect Avenue is half a mile south. The high school is a mile west. Big building, potentially defensible. Or we move toward the suburbs where density is lower. Lower density of people means lower density of infected, Trish added. Theoretically. It's all theoretical, Marcus said. His voice was tired, not hostile. Every plan we make is a guess built on assumptions about things we don't understand. He was right. We didn't understand transmission rates. We didn't understand their sensory capabilities. Was it sound only, or also sight, smell, heat? We didn't understand how many were out there, or whether there were zones of safety. We were planning in a vacuum, drawing maps in the dark. But the alternative was waiting to starve. In a building that was becoming more compromised by the hour. The service stairwell door had developed a visible bow in its center. The constant pressure was warping the metal. My estimate gave it 2 more days before failure, maybe less. We decided to move by the end of the following day, 24 hours to prepare. It felt like both too much time and not enough. Preparation revealed our fractures, not physical ones, psychological. The cracks that had been forming since the first night now widened under the pressure of impending action. Becca withdrew. She stopped participating in planning discussions, stopped responding to direct questions with more than monosyllables. When I found her sitting alone in the bathroom at midnight, her face illuminated by a dying flashlight, she told me she'd decided not to go. I'll stay here, she said. I'll take my chances with the building. Becca, the barricades are failing. Then I'll go to the roof. There's nothing on the roof. No water, no shade, no shelter. There's distance, she said, echoing my own word back to me. I'll take distance over running through an open parking lot. I sat with her in the dark bathroom and felt the weight of a responsibility I'd never asked for. I wasn't her boss, her friend, her family. I was a security guard who'd happened to be working the night the world ended. But she was looking at me with eyes that wanted permission. Permission to opt out, to be afraid, to choose the certainty of a slow death over the chaos of an uncertain one. I can't make you come, I said. I know. But I want you to. She smiled, a thin, exhausted expression that disappeared as quickly as it came. I know that too. Jake's fracture manifested differently. He became aggressively optimistic, narrating plans with increasing grandiosity. The fire station would have weapons. The school would have supplies for weeks. Once they reached the suburbs, they could find a vehicle and drive west. Colorado, the mountains, somewhere isolated. Each iteration of the plan grew more elaborate and less grounded. Priya let him talk because it kept him focused, but I watched the others tune out, their faces showing the quiet recognition that hope, untethered from reality, becomes delusion. Marcus pulled me aside during our watch shift. The service stairwell was quiet. The infected on the other side had settled into a low-frequency rhythm of movement that suggested reduced activity, possibly related to the absence of stimulating sound. "I'm not going with the group," Marcus said. My stomach dropped. "What?" "I'm going alone. North. Topeka is 67 miles. I can drive it in an hour if I find a car." Alone is suicide. Staying is suicide on a longer timeline. And going with 7 people is a circus. We're slow, we're loud, we disagree on everything. I move faster alone. "Marcus." "My kids, Daniel. My kids are in Topeka." I couldn't argue with that. I wanted to. Every tactical instinct told me that group survival depended on numbers, on collective decision-making, on the fundamental human truth that we are stronger together than apart. But Marcus wasn't operating on tactics. He was operating on something deeper, something that made tactics irrelevant. "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow night. Same time as everyone else. I'll use the distraction you create and go north while you go south." "Okay." "Okay? What else can I say?" He put his hand on my shoulder. In 3 years of working together, it was the first time we'd touched beyond handshakes. "You're a good man, Daniel. Keep them alive if you can. You too." He let go. We finished our shift in silence, so our group of 7 was already splintering before we'd even moved. Becca refusing to leave. Marcus departing alone. 5 of us heading south. Priya, Jake, Omar, Trish, and me. 5 felt both too many and too few. Enough to be noticed, not enough to defend against a real threat. Priya adjusted the plan without visible emotion. She redistributed supplies into 5 packs. Backpacks and tote bags scavenged from the co-working space. Water, food, medical supplies from Jake's pharmacy run. Flashlights, the drill with remaining battery, a set of Allen keys that might serve as improvised tools. Each pack weighed roughly 15 pounds. Light enough to run with. Heavy enough to matter. The day of departure, I spent 3 hours on the balcony watching Lot C. The southern exposure gave me a clear view of the parking area, the access road beyond it, and the first few blocks of residential neighborhood stretching toward Prospect Avenue. What I saw was both encouraging and devastating. The lot itself was largely empty of infected. I counted 4. 3 clustered near the main entrance on the far side of the building, 1 standing motionless beside a concrete planter near the access road. Their positions hadn't changed in the hours I'd watched. Without stimulation, they seemed to default to a standby state, vertical but inert, like appliances waiting for input. The residential streets were harder to assess. I could see perhaps 2 blocks before buildings obstructed my view. Movement was visible, distant figures with that telltale gait. But I couldn't estimate numbers from this angle and distance. The fire station was beyond my visual range. I reported to Priya. She absorbed the information with the systematic calm that had become her defining characteristic in crisis. 4 in the lot, 1 near our descent point, others at distance. Manageable. If the distraction works. It'll work. The distraction was Jake's design, elegant in its simplicity. We'd connected the building's fire alarm to a portable battery, allowing us to trigger it manually. The alarm speakers were distributed throughout the building, but the loudest cluster was on the north side, near the main lobby. When activated, it would create an overwhelming audio stimulus that should draw every sound-responsive infected in the vicinity toward the north face of the building while we descended from the south balcony. Should, theory, assumption, Becca found me before nightfall. She'd changed her mind. Or rather, her fear had changed. Staying alone in a dark building surrounded by the dead had become more terrifying than fleeing through them. She didn't explain, just appeared with her backpack on and stood with the rest of us in the second-floor common area as darkness settled. Marcus said goodbye to each person individually. A handshake for Jake, a nod for Omar, a word I couldn't hear for Trish, a long look at Priya that communicated something between them I didn't fully understand. When he reached me, he smiled. "See you on the other side," he said. "Whichever side that is." He left through the east stairwell, the one we'd secured on the second night. We unscrewed the door, let him through with his pack, and sealed it behind him. His plan was to exit through the second-floor window on the east side, drop to the dumpster below, and move north through the service alleys. It was dangerous. Everything was dangerous. Danger had become the medium through which all action occurred, like water for fish. At 10 p.m., Priya triggered the fire alarm. The sound was extraordinary. A shrieking, pulsing wail that filled the building and radiated outward through every wall and window. Even on the second floor, it was painful. On the ground floor, near the speakers, it must have been overwhelming. I was on the balcony, watching. Within 30 seconds, the infected in Lot C began to move. All four of them, simultaneously, swiveling toward the north side of the building and lurching into motion. The one near the planter passed directly below me, close enough to see the crown of its head, the matted hair, the stain on its shoulders, and disappeared around the corner. The lot was clear. "Now," I said into the radio. Jake went first down the braided Ethernet cable we'd anchored to the balcony railing. He descended hand over hand, the cable stretching under his weight but holding. He hit the ground, stumbled, recovered, and signaled upward. Trish went next, then Omar, then Becca, who paused at the railing for a full 10 seconds before committing. Priya and I went last. She descended cleanly, athletic, controlled. I followed, the cable burning through my hands despite the leather gloves I'd found in a desk drawer. My feet hit asphalt, and the impact shot through my knees. We were outside, in the open, in the dark, the alarm still wailing behind us like a wounded thing. "South," Priya said. "Move." Running in the dark through a dead city is a sensory experience that no screen or story can prepare you for. The absence of ambient human noise, no traffic, no music, no voices, created a silence so complete that our own footfalls sounded obscene. 6 people sprinting across asphalt, breathing hard, backpacks jostling, the fire alarm fading behind us with each stride. We crossed Lot C in 40 seconds, hit the access road, turned south onto a residential street I knew by name, Benton Boulevard, but barely recognized in the dark. The houses were identical silhouettes, uniformly unlit, their windows reflecting nothing. Cars sat in driveways at angles that suggested hasty departures. A bicycle lay on its side in the middle of the road, chain still spinning faintly in a breeze that carried the smell of something sweet and wrong. Jake was point, Priya at rear. I held the middle with Becca beside me and Trish and Omar between us and Jake. We moved fast but controlled, jogging, not sprinting, conserving energy, maintaining formation. Priya's corporate management skills translated surprisingly well into tactical coordination. 2 blocks south, Jake raised his fist. "Stop." We froze. He pointed left. A figure stood on the porch of a darkened house, 20 feet away. Motionless, vertical. That standby mode I'd observed from the balcony. It hadn't noticed us, or more precisely, we hadn't provided sufficient stimulus to activate it. Our footsteps on asphalt were apparently below its threshold. We crept past, single file, heel to toe. My heart was so loud in my chest, I was certain it qualified as stimulus. But the figure remained inert. We cleared its line of sight and resumed jogging. The fire station appeared at the end of the 3rd block. A squat brick building with 2 bay doors and a flagpole bearing a limp American flag. 1 bay door was open. The truck was gone. The station was dark. We entered through the open bay, moving from moonlight into absolute blackness. Jake swept his flashlight across the interior. Concrete floor, tool racks, an empty parking bay where Engine 47 would normally rest. The station smelled like diesel fuel and cleaning chemicals. Normal smells. Civilian smells. "Clear the building," Priya whispered. Jake and I moved through the station systematically. The apparatus bay was empty. The office, desks, computers, filing cabinets was undisturbed. The kitchen still had dishes in the sink. The bunk room upstairs held 6 beds, all made, all empty. The crew had left in their truck and hadn't returned. "It's empty," I reported. The relief was physical, shoulders dropping, jaws unclenching. Becca sat on the apparatus bay floor and put her head between her knees. Omar laughed, a single, inappropriate bark of sound that he immediately stifled. We closed the bay door manually, pulling it down on its chain until it sealed against the concrete. The darkness became total. Jake's flashlight was our only sun. The station had supplies we desperately needed. The kitchen held canned food, enough for days if we rationed. A water cooler stood full in the office. The first aid station was professional grade, IV supplies, splints, morphine in a locked cabinet that Marcus could have picked, but none of us could. The bunks offered actual mattresses after 3 nights on carpet over concrete. We ate like survivors, which is to say, too fast and with no conversation. Canned soup, cold from the can, tasting like the best meal of my life because my body was burning its reserves and anything caloric registered as salvation. After eating, Priya established the same protocols. Watch rotation. 2 people awake at all times. Listen for sounds. Maintain silence. I took first watch with Trish. We sat in the apparatus bay in total darkness, listening to the world outside. Through the metal bay door, the city was quiet. No alarm. The battery would have died by now. The fire alarm falling silent. No shuffling, no impacts. Just night and silence. And the knowledge that somewhere out there, Marcus was moving alone through the same darkness towards children who might already be beyond saving. We stayed at the fire station for 2 days. It was Priya's decision not to push further until we'd rested, assessed our options, and determined a more distant destination. The station was secure, well supplied, and positioned on a corner lot with clear sight lines from the 2nd floor windows. We could see approaching threats from any direction. During those 2 days, we learned things. Trish became our primary observer, spending hours at the upstairs windows with binoculars she'd found in the captain's office. Her notes filled pages of a yellow legal pad she'd taken from Meridian Plaza. "They're more active in heat," she reported on the first morning. Daytime movement is higher than nighttime. Not hugely, but noticeably. Suggests their metabolism, whatever drives them, responds to temperature. Like cold-blooded animals, Omar said. Like something that used to be warm-blooded and isn't anymore. She also observed that they congregated near sound, and in the absence of sound, drifted toward other infected. They formed loose clusters that moved together without apparent coordination, not hunting in packs, but gravitating toward density through some mechanism she couldn't identify. Perhaps pheromonal, perhaps auditory at frequencies below human perception. Groups mean danger, she concluded. Individual infected are manageable, avoidable. Groups create compounding threat because their collective movement generates sound that attracts more. Jake processed this differently than the rest of us. Where Trish saw data, he saw tactical possibility. We need to move in the cool hours, pre-dawn, minimum group noise, avoid clusters by routing through low-density areas. And where are we routing to? I asked. This was the conversation we'd been circling. The fire station was temporary. Safe for now, but not indefinitely. The food would last a week at rationing levels. The water cooler was finite. And if a cluster of infected drifted close enough to detect our presence, the station's bay doors, industrial metal but not designed as fortification, would present the same problem as Meridian Plaza's glass lobby on a slightly longer timeline. Priya had been studying a road map she'd found in the truck bay. She spread it on the kitchen table, and we gathered around it in flashlight glow. South takes us toward Grandview. Lower density residential, then agricultural land. If we can reach the rural fringe, 10 miles, the infected population should thin proportional to the living population that was there to be infected. 10 miles, Becca said. That's 3 hours of walking, minimum. In the open, Omar added. In the dark, Priya said. Pre-dawn, as Jake suggested. We move at 3 a.m., reach the rural fringe by sunrise. Find a structure, farmhouse, barn, anything, and fortify for the following day. It was a plan. Not perfect. No plan could be perfect with this many unknowns. But it had logic, it had a destination, and it had a timeline. Those 3 elements were enough to create the illusion of control, which was enough to keep 6 people functional. I lay in a bunk that night, unable to sleep despite the mattress, despite the exhaustion. I was thinking about Marcus, about whether he'd made it to the highway, about whether the highway was passable or choked with abandoned vehicles, about his children in Topeka, whether they were alive, whether they were infected, whether they'd recognize their father if he reached them, or whether he'd find something wearing their faces that no longer knew his name. I was also thinking about the woman on camera 9, the first one, the Tuesday night figure with the tilted head and slack jaw. She'd been someone before, a person with a name and a job and people who loved her. She'd stood in that parking lot experiencing something I couldn't imagine. The transition between human consciousness and whatever these things possessed instead. Had it hurt? Had she been afraid? Had there been a moment of awareness, a last flicker of self before the lights went out permanently? I didn't know. I would never know. And somehow that uncertainty was worse than any answer could have been. We left the fire station at 3:15 a.m. on the 5th day since the outbreak began. The air was cool, 70 degrees, the lowest it would reach in August. And the darkness was complete. Cloud cover obscured the moon and stars, which helped conceal us, but made navigation dependent on Priya's compass and the road map she'd memorized. The formation was tighter now. Jake still led, but closer to the group. I walked beside Becca, who'd been increasingly silent but steady, her earlier paralysis replaced by a grim functionality. Omar had Trish's elbow, guiding her over obstacles invisible in the dark. Priya walked last, her steps measured and deliberate. The residential streets of southern Kansas City gave way gradually to wider lots, then to stretches where houses sat far apart with fields between them. The transition wasn't clean. There was no line where city became country. But by the time we'd been walking 90 minutes, the houses had thinned enough that we could see open land on either side. We encountered infected 3 times during the walk. The first was a solitary figure standing in the middle of the road, which we detoured around by cutting through a gas station parking lot. It never moved. The second was a cluster of 5 near a highway overpass, their shapes visible against the lighter gray of the concrete. We gave them 2 blocks of clearance, looping through a residential cul-de-sac that added 10 minutes to our route. The third was the worst. A sound, distant but distinct. Not human, not mechanical. A kind of masked vocalization, like a stadium crowd heard from miles away. Except the pitch was wrong. Too uniform, too constant. No rhythm of chanting or cheering, just a sustained, low-frequency murmur that came from the west and filled the air like weather. "What is that?" Becca whispered. We all heard it. All stopped. Jake killed his flashlight. We'd been using it sparingly, only at road crossings, and we stood in total darkness, listening to the sound of what I could only interpret as hundreds or thousands of infected producing noise simultaneously. A congregation of the dead gathered somewhere to our west, generating a sound that was less threatening than it was profoundly wrong. "Keep moving," Priya said. "South, away from it." We moved faster after that. The sound didn't grow louder, but it didn't fade either. It sat in the ambient background like a radio station that couldn't quite be tuned away from. Trish was muttering calculations, distance based on volume, estimating the size of the cluster. Her numbers were terrifying. She stopped sharing them. Dawn found us on a county road flanked by cornfields. The stalks were chest-high, August growth not yet ready for harvest, forming walls of green on either side that obscured vision beyond 5 feet into the rows. It was simultaneously concealing and claustrophobic. We couldn't be seen from the road, but we also couldn't see what might be moving within the corn. Jake spotted the farmhouse first. A white clapboard structure set back from the road, partially obscured by a windbreak of mature oaks. A red barn behind it. A gravel driveway leading to a detached garage. No vehicles visible, no lights, no movement. We approached from the south, cutting through the cornfield to avoid the exposed driveway. The stalks whispered against our clothes as we moved. Dry, papery sounds that seemed deafening in the dawn quiet. When we reached the edge of the field, the farmhouse lay 50 yards across open lawn. "I'll go first," Jake said. "No," Priya said. "Daniel and I will go. You stay with the others." For the first time, Jake argued. "Why you?" "Because if something goes wrong, you're the fastest. You get them back to the road and you run." It was logical. It was also a calculation about expendability, who the group could afford to lose. Priya and I were the oldest, the least physically fast. The most replaceable if raw survival was the metric. She didn't say any of this. She didn't have to. We crossed the lawn together, low and quick, and reached the farmhouse porch without incident. The front door was unlocked. The interior was dark and silent and empty. We were alone. The farmhouse became our sanctuary for 9 days. 9 days of quiet, rationed routine in a structure that offered everything Meridian Plaza hadn't. Natural ventilation through operable windows, a well with a manual pump in the backyard, A pantry stocked with canned goods by someone who'd apparently prepared for winter rather than apocalypse. There was no electricity. The grid failure extended this far. But there was a wood stove for cooking and candles in every drawer, as if the previous occupants had anticipated frequent outages. We never found the occupants. Their belongings remained. Clothes in closets, photos on walls, a half-finished crossword on the kitchen table. But they were gone. Whether they'd evacuated early, been taken, or wandered into the corn as something other than themselves, we couldn't know. I tried not to look too long at the family photos. A couple in their 60s, grandchildren in Easter clothes, a dog that wasn't there either. The first 4 days were recovery. Sleep, food, hydration, the slow rebuilding of bodies that had been running on adrenaline and denial. We ate properly. Heated soup on the wood stove, canned vegetables, even found flour and baking powder that Omar used to make crude biscuits that tasted like hope. But recovery also meant processing. And processing broke something in Jake on day 5. It happened at dinner. A conversation about long-term plans that shifted from logistics to philosophy. Trish suggested that the outbreak might be containable, that somewhere authorities were organizing, that there might be safe zones. Jake laughed. Not his usual optimistic energy, something brittle and sharp. Safe zones. Listen to yourself. This isn't a movie where the military saves everyone in Act 3. This is extinction. You don't know that, Becca said. I know math. I know transmission rates. 1 bite, 20 minutes, full conversion. No immunity. No treatment. You do the exponential curve on that and tell me where it flattens. It flattens when population density drops below transmission threshold, Trish said. Which is exactly why we came here. We came here to die slower. That's all we did. The room went cold. Not from temperature, from the withdrawal of the collective fiction we'd been maintaining. The fiction that this was temporary, that the old world existed somewhere beyond our visibility and would eventually reassert itself. Jake had named what everyone secretly feared, and naming it made it real. Priya spoke with the quiet authority she'd maintained since the first night. Jake, whether the world recovers or doesn't is outside our control. What we do tomorrow is inside our control. I need you focused on tomorrow. Tomorrow, he said. And the day after, and the day after that. For how long? A year, 10 years? Living in someone else's house, eating expired cans until we run out and have to move again. Running from one temporary shelter to the next, always one sound too loud from being overrun. Nobody answered. Because he wasn't wrong. He was just saying what we'd all calculated and chosen not to articulate. The math was unforgiving. Even here, in this quiet farmhouse, surrounded by corn and distance, we were finite. The pantry would empty, the crops would rot without tending. Winter would come, and the wood stove would require fuel, and the fuel would require venturing into the open. Survival wasn't a moment of triumph. It was an infinite sequence of problems, each one capable of ending everything, stretching forward without terminus. I went outside that night, stood on the porch in the warm dark, and listened to the silence that wasn't quite silence. Crickets, wind and corn, the distant murmur that never fully faded. Somewhere west, thousands of infected still congregated, their purpose unknowable. I thought about what I'd been before this, a security guard, a divorced man in a one-bedroom apartment, someone who watched screens for a living and went home to silence. My life before the outbreak had been small and quiet and lonely. And now, surrounded by people I'd die to protect, I was still lonely. Just differently. On day 7 at the farmhouse, Omar's radio found a signal. He'd been cycling through frequencies on a hand-crank emergency radio from the pantry, mostly static, occasionally fragments of automated broadcasts that told us nothing new. But on this morning, a human voice cut through the white noise. Repeat. FEMA Relocation Center operational at Camp Gruber, Oklahoma. All survivors in the Central Corridor proceed south on Highway 69. Military escort at Pittsburgh, Kansas. Repeat. The transmission looped. Same message, same voice, same instructions. Camp Gruber was a military facility in eastern Oklahoma, nearly 200 miles from our position. Highway 69 ran south through Kansas into Oklahoma. Pittsburgh, Kansas was approximately 100 miles away. 100 miles. On foot with 6 people. Through territory of unknown, infected density. It could take a week. Maybe more. But it was something. A destination that wasn't just the next farmhouse. A place where structure might exist. Where the old world's institutions might still function in some reduced capacity. The debate lasted hours. Jake predictably opposed. It's a recording. Could be days old, could be weeks old. Camp Gruber might be overrun by now. Or it might be operational, Trish said. The military has resources we don't. Perimeter security, medicine, organized supply chains. Or it's a collection point. Thousands of refugees packed together. One infected individual gets through and it's Meridian Plaza on a massive scale. We can't stay here forever, Omar said. You said it yourself. This is dying slower. Jake's own words turned against him. He had no response. Priya called a vote. Not because she believed in democracy under these circumstances. She'd told me privately that she'd make the decision regardless. But because she understood that people who feel consulted commit more fully than people who feel commanded. The vote was 5-1. Only Jake dissented. He agreed to come regardless. I'm not staying alone, he said. And in that admission was a vulnerability he'd never shown before. For all his energy and aggression, Jake Novak was terrified of solitude, of being the last one thinking in a world of empty minds. We spent 2 days preparing, studied the map, calculated distances between potential shelter points, packed supplies for 10 days, all the canned food we could carry without compromising mobility, filled water containers from the well, made crude weapons from farm tools, a hatchet, a pitchfork with its handle cut short, a length of iron pipe from the barn. We weren't warriors. None of us had military training or combat experience. The weapons were psychological as much as practical, objects that made us feel less helpless. If we encountered a cluster, no number of improvised tools would save us. Our survival depended entirely on avoidance, on Trish's observations about behavior and stimulus, on moving quiet and unseen through a landscape of predators. The morning we left, I walked through the farmhouse one last time, past the family photos I'd avoided looking at, past the crossword puzzle, still unfinished, past the grandchildren's drawings on the refrigerator, crayon houses with triangle roofs and circular suns, a world of normal rendered in primary colors by hands that might never draw again. I closed the front door behind me. It didn't lock, the kind of place where people didn't lock doors, had never needed to. I left it open. If someone came after us, survivors, refugees, the lost and the desperate, they'd find shelter here. Canned food remaining in the pantry, water in the well, safety in the distance from the city. It was the only kindness I could offer to a future I might never see. A door left open in a world full of closed ones. We walked south. 6 people in the dawn light, carrying everything they owned on their backs, following a road toward a promise made by a voice on a radio that might already be dead. It was absurd. It was hopeless. It was the only option left. The journey south was 18 days. I will not describe each one. Some were monotonous, defined only by miles walked and calories burned. Others were defined by terror. I will describe what mattered. On day 3, we lost Omar. Not to the infected, to a fall. A bridge over a creek had partially collapsed, and he misjudged the gap. 12 feet onto rocks. His leg broke in 2 places, the bone visible through his shin. Trish splinted it with materials from our pack while he screamed into a wadded shirt. We couldn't carry him. He knew it before we said it. "Leave the radio," he said. "Take the food. Go." We left him at a house near the bridge with water, canned goods, and the morphine tablets Jake had taken from the pharmacy. Enough to manage pain. Enough to end pain if it came to that. Priya wrote the FEMA coordinates on his arm in permanent marker, in case someone found him, in case he healed enough to crawl. We were 5. On day 8, we found Pittsburgh. The military escort the broadcast promised was there, in a sense. 2 Humvees sat at an intersection, doors open, empty. No soldiers, no bodies, no signs of struggle, just abandoned vehicles, and a silence that suggested organized departure rather than violent conclusion. The military had been here and left. Whether they'd retreated or been overrun at a distance, we couldn't know. But the road signs they'd erected remained. Arrows pointing south. Camp Gruber, 93 miles. Official, authoritative, real enough to keep moving. On day 12, we encountered other survivors, a family of 4, mother, father, 2 teenagers, moving south on the same highway. They were from Joplin, Missouri. They'd been walking for 3 weeks. They told us things. The infection had gone global, not just American. Every continent, every nation. Their source was a shortwave radio the father carried. He'd heard BBC broadcasts from London, transmissions from Tokyo, fragments from Sao Paulo, all describing the same phenomenon, all collapsing in sequence. "There's no safe country," the mother said. "There's no safe anywhere, only safer." They walked with us for 2 days before splitting off toward a rumored settlement in Arkansas. We exchanged supplies and information and the peculiar intimacy of strangers bonded by shared extinction. On day 15, Jake saved my life. An infected emerged from a drainage culvert as I passed, lunging with speed I hadn't observed before, faster than the shuffling standby mode, triggered to full activation by my proximity. It grabbed my pack, pulling me backward. Jake was there in a heartbeat, the hatchet swinging, connecting with the thing's forearm with enough force to sever tendons, if not bone. It released. I fell forward. We ran. It was the closest I'd come. The memory lives in my shoulder blades, the phantom grip of fingers that shouldn't still function, the tug of something hungry and mechanical and relentless. On day 18, we saw Camp Gruber. From a hilltop at dawn, looking south. A perimeter of concrete barriers, military tents in rows, vehicles moving, and most importantly, lights. Powered lights. Electric illumination in a world that had gone dark weeks ago. We approached slowly. A watchtower spotted us at 300 yards. A voice on a loudspeaker instructed us to raise our hands, approach single file, and submit to medical screening. We complied. Every instruction followed instantly, gratefully. The voice represented structure, authority, the continued existence of systems we'd believed destroyed. They separated us for screening. 48 hours in an isolation tent with 4 other new arrivals, monitored for symptoms. Blood drawn, questions asked, sleep permitted on actual cots with actual blankets. I slept for 14 hours straight. The first true rest since the night before camera 9 showed me a woman standing in a parking lot with her head tilted wrong. The first surrender of vigilance since the world demanded I never look away. When I woke, Priya was beside me on her own cot, also awake, looking at the tent ceiling. "We made it," she said. "We made it," I agreed. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like breathing after nearly drowning. The absence of dying is not the same as living. But it was enough. For now, it was enough. They gave us roles at Camp Gruber. Structure demands contribution. Priya joined logistics, organizing supplies, managing inventory. The same skills that had kept us alive now applied to keeping 1,000 survivors fed. Trish works in the observation unit, studying infected behavior from behind reinforced fences, turning her legal pad notes into something approaching science. Jake runs perimeter patrol with a borrowed rifle and the same intensity that once drove product launches. Becca found the medical unit, assisting nurses with quiet competence. I watch cameras again. 16 monitors in a prefab building near the main gate. Same job, different stakes. When I see movement at the perimeter, I don't log it and move on. I radio the response team. People come with weapons and training and organized purpose. The system works, imperfectly, provisionally, but functionally. Some nights I think about Marcus, about whether he reached Topeka, about his children, about the woman on camera 9. I think about how I noticed something was wrong before anyone told me it was, and how that noticing, that willingness to look at a screen and trust what it showed me over what I wanted to believe, might be the only reason I'm still here. I keep watching. It's what I do.